My computer. We are set to go.
All right, if I'm presiding, normally the bailiff would call the case. This is the Aquatic Center for Exploration versus Alex Chern Eubanks. See, we have both plaintiffs and defendants counsel ready. Are there any housekeeping matters?
Yes, Your Honor. We'd like to pre-admit some exhibits.
All right. If there are no objections to the exhibits, then yes, that's fine. What exhibits do you wish to pre-admit?
1, 2, 6, and 8.
And I'll ask, you're the plaintiff, right, ma'am?
Yes, sir.
Defendants, do you have any objections to 1, 2, 6, or 8?
No objections, Your Honor, to all exhibits apart from Exhibit 8. We do object to Exhibit 8
Okay.
On the grounds of it being hearsay.
All right, fine. And we won't rule on that. We need to have the testimony and see. But if there's no objection to 1, 2, and 6, they are admitted. What that means is you need not go through ask the witness to identify it because it's already in evidence. You do need to go through showing the exhibit to opposing counsel so they make sure it's not been altered and then proceed as normal. That'll save you a couple of minutes, I hope, in your presentation. Any other housekeeping matters?
No, Your Honor.
Plaintiff, present your opening statement.
Your Honor and members of the jury, my name is Katie Froelich, and along with co-counsel Olivia Stroud and Silver Crossan, we will be representing ACE, the Aquatic Center of Exploration, a corporation of over 9,000 team members, a part of the ACE family. On November 3rd, 2022, Nano Design, a well-known local billionaire submarine, lost connection along with their air supply. Through our witnesses, clear, we will prove that Nano was in his right mind. He presented no signs of insanity prior, and we will see that he was just a genius who wasn't used to writing things down. And that is not evidence against him. This shows that he was in his right mind to create a new will and understood exactly what he was doing. One of our witnesses, Jackie Long, who knew the general state of property, will showcase that he had an insanely good reputation. He served in the Naval Academy for 24 years, and he is now the lead dive instructor for the Dive and Service Scuba Diving Company, where he trained Nano, who already knew how to swim and was an excellent student. Terry Cloth will further demonstrate this through his medical examination that she conducted prior to the incident, that he was in fact better than okay. He even underwent special naval training because he was so advanced with Jackie Long. He further proves his sanity through his handwriting. If his body had truly been shutting down, his handwriting quality would have decreased. Terry Cloth was a general practitioner for 8 years. A part of his job was to diagnose and treat any alignment or injury. He graduated with a degree in biology, the top quarter of his class from medical school. He went to high school with Nano, and in 2018, at their 15-year reunion, he reunited with Nano, who offered him a job as a personal physician. He would perform moderate checkups and physicals once per week and blood work once per month, performing extensive physical and cognitive tests once per quarter. Nano had breathing issues, but still after a couple days, they were gone and there were no lingering effects onward after October 2nd. There was a treadmill accident where Nano got caught up in the wires, which shows how it wasn't due to his fatigue he felt. Yet still, he never got a score between 25 in the mini mental state exams given to him. Dr. Cloth did not see any signs that showed he was mentally or physically unable to during the physical. Jackie Long was extremely experienced in his field and trained Nano and proved that there was not a single sign of mental issues. Nano would spend massive amounts of money and understood his wealth. Nano was dedicated to this diving project as he spent over $300,000 on training, showing his dedication to ACE and the dive. Nano wrote this will and left it to the Aquatic Center of Exploration so they could continue their deep sea exploration, not Alex Eubank, whose based on his statement is clearly using Nano for his fortune. He underwent many tests that further strengthened his breathing and that made his lungs even stronger from dealing with low oxygen training. We will prove that Max Northshire is very contradictory, and his math about oxygen was proven to be incorrect. Terry Cloth performed routine medical checks physically and mentally that continued to prove Nano was in fact perfectly stable. Our other witnesses, Cliff Leclerc, proves that Nano was in his right state of mind. He presented with no signs of insanity prior to his trip. Jackie Lung, his personal trainer, who spent many weeks training and observing Nano, stated that he was extremely ahead in his training and even excelling in every single test with flying colors and no problems. He understood the extent of his money and his legal rights as he went over his will every week, showing that a change in will is not out of character for Nano. In fact, it is a weekly occurrence. While his writing can seem like chicken scratch, that is just because he's an important man who doesn't really write. And his notes were simply just his personal notes, meaning the typos were not due to his mental capacity, just because they were his notes. Nano was in his right mind because of all his training and low oxygen training he underwent and prepared him for those conditions, as well as his legal understanding of his will and vast amount of money. He was completely competent and able to rewrite his will. We will prove that ACE stands for the Aquatic Center of Exploration, the place where his training happened and where he spent a majority of his time. Ladies and gentlemen, using the character witnesses in the evidence, we hope you decide in favor of ACE, the Aquatic Center of Exploration, due to these facts.
All right. Defense, do you wish to make an opening?
Yes, Your Honor.
Proceed.
May it please the court, Your Honor, members of the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you all for being here today. My name is Gala Rosas, and today my co-counsel and I will show you that the story the plaintiff would lead you to believe just doesn't add up. On the contrary, it is a dam full of cracks, just waiting to collapse. On November 1st, 2022, the submersible known as the Tutu commenced an underwater dive just southeast of the Tuxoma Trench. The Tutu was designed and operated by the Aquatic Center of Exploration. During the dive, the submersible lost contact with the surface and eventually ran out of oxygen. This led to the death of Nano Design, a billionaire that wrote a handwritten will in the submersible while the oxygen supply was dropping. Now, the plaintiff wants you to believe that this will was written while Mr. Design was mentally competent, but we, the defense, will show you how the events of November 1st and the days leading up to it led to the mental decline and death of Nano Design. In doing this, we will prove that Nano Design was not mentally competent when he wrote the will in the Tutu and shine a light on the cracks in the plaintiff's dam. We expect you to hear a boatload of information today, but let me reassure you of what you are here to determine today. The prosecution has the burden of proving that Mr. Design had sufficient testamentary capacity when he wrote his holographic will in the sub. This meant he understood that he was making a will, he understood the effects of making this will. He also understood the general nature and extent of his property, and he was acquainted with the individuals to whom he intended to devise and bequeath his property to. Your role as jurors is to decide whether Nano Design was mentally competent while in the submersible, potentially rendering the holographic will found in his notebook invalid. The plaintiff has the burden of proving by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Design was mentally competent when writing his will. That means that you must be more than 50% sure that they have satisfied all four arguments. At the end of today's trial, if you find that they have failed to meet their burden, then you must rule in favor of the defense. Today, we have three witnesses. First, you will hear from Ms. Handlet, Nano's personal estate lawyer. She will brief you on Nano's earlier wills, highlighting his tendency to include various organizations as beneficiaries. This helps clarify why leaving his entire estate to the Aquatic Center doesn't add up. Next, we have Dr. Max Northshire, the expert hired by Ms. Eubanks' attorneys to confirm the pages in a notebook found in the submersible were in fact written by Mr. Design and Jesse Watkins. They will also provide insights into their professional evaluation regarding Nano's mental capacities during the incident. Lastly, we have Ms. Eubanks here to testify about her personal and professional relationship with Nano Design. The long-lasting connection with Alex Eubanks and Nano Design will help you understand who Nano was really referring to in his final note, "I forgive you," the last phrase we got from Nano. In his final moments, Mr. Design addressed his final conversation with Miss Eubanks. They had a fight prior to Nano boarding the submersible. The idea that Mr. Design was forgiving the company that caused this unfortunate situation, it just doesn't add up. Once you've heard all the evidence, it will be clear that the plaintiff's arguments just don't add up. The frame in the story they wanted you to believe is slowly collapsing. Like a dam, it is starting to crack. Ladies and gentlemen, the plaintiff's arguments don't add up. As this trial concludes, we will request that you recognize the inconsistencies in their narrative and find in favor of the defense. Thank you.
All right. Plaintiff, call your first witness.
Your Honor, the plaintiff team calls Ms. Terry Cloth to stand.
Hi, my name is Dr. Terry Cloth.
All right, wait, hold on. I just want to know which picture I'm looking at. That's right. All right, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Ma'am, would you please introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Dr. Terry Cloth.
Thank you. And Dr. Cloth, what was your relation to Mr. Design?
I was his personal physician. I perform moderate checkups and physicals once a week, blood work once a month, and an extensive physical and cognitive test once per quarter.
Okay, perfect. And how did you acquire this particular job?
Well, actually, it was back in 2018 during a high school reunion that I saw Nano at. There, I told him about how I was unhappy with my current job at a clinic, so he offered me this one.
And how much were you paid as his personal physician?
I was paid $250,000, and he reimbursed me for any expenses while I was his physician.
Would you please elaborate on your experience and time in the field of medicine and human health?
Yes, my medical journey began when I graduated from Granada Medical School in the top quarter of my class. And then after graduation, I interned at Muscle Shoals Municipal Hospital in Alabama. After that, I went to Dead Man Medical Center where I completed my residency. Then I became an associate physician at a practice known as Walk-In Medics, where I practiced general medicine, which means I treated anything that came in.
How long have you been seeing to Mr. Design's health exactly?
I was seeing to Mr. Design's health from around 2018 to 2022, so I'd say about 5-ish years.
And based on your training, experience, education, and personal observations of Mr. Design, did you have any opinion on whether he was competent to make the will on November 3rd?
I do. I believe that he was fully competent because I have no reason to believe that he had any mental.
Objection, Your Honor.
State the objection.
Improper opinion. The witness is not established as an expert in the field of psychology.
Response?
She is not, but she was a professional doctor. She had seen him for many years, and I would hope that she would be able to tell if he was okay physically and mentally through her training.
Objections overruled.
Okay, back to where we were. Ms. Cloth, have you ever noticed any symptoms or indications during any of your appointments that would show he had dementia or any other health issues?
No.
And what was the overall state of Mr. Design's health?
Excellent.
Did he have any long-term breathing issues or concerns?
No. However, one time after a mountain climb, Mr. Design was experiencing some short-term breathing issues, but they resolved themselves quickly and they had no long-term effect.
Perfect. And would you please recount the physical that occurred on October 2nd and the context behind it?
Yes, I got a call from Mr. Design himself which was unusual because
Objection, Your Honor.
State the objection.
Question calls for narration.
Yeah, all right, I'll sustain that. Ask specific questions, please.
Okay, sorry, my bad. Let me try again. Would you please tell me your view and opinion of the physical and just what you have perceived of it?
the physical, it was interrupted because Nano fell off the treadmill and he got tangled up in some cords.
Well, besides that, how was it until the interruption?
Oh, it was going smoothly and perfectly fine, in fact.
With that, I'd actually like to show the pre-admitted exhibit 6, Your Honor, if that is allowed.
That's been pre-admitted, and you can't physically show it to the other side, but
Right. Do you want me to hold up to the screen? Is that
just
Right.
if you were, yes.
here is the pre-admitted exhibit 6. And with that, can you please share, Dr. Cloth, your conclusion that you came to at the end of the examination through your notes?
I concluded that the patient was in good shape and that the patient had reports of substantial experience with scuba diving. And so, through the data from the examination and all the reports and tests from beforehand, I saw no reason, condition, or concern to advise against a scuba dive.
And how would your medical opinion have changed, and the physical would have changed if you knew what he was planning to do?
I don't think my physical or opinion would have changed much. My biggest reason for wanting to know what he was really up to would be that I had concern for a friend undertaking such a dangerous expedition.
Perfect. And then to actually move on for it, how often did you observe Mr. Design writing anything by hand?
Not very often at all. I would only ever see him do it in a tiny notebook he carried around with him. And he didn't really write much in high school either. In fact, there was actually one time where he got so angry.
Objection, Your Honor.
State the objection.
The witness is narrating.
Yeah, sustain.
Sorry, let me move on to a new question if the judge goes through with it. I would like to ask Ms. Claw, can you please state a context of an occurrence if he ever did say ace, like an occurrence of when Dr. Design did say ace if he was in your vicinity?
Yes, he called Alex, well, no, he didn't, wait, Nano didn't call Alex Ace. He never has referred to Ace, Alex as Ace in my vicinity, but it was more, not a noun, but an object of preposition, like Alex, take me to Ace.
And then I'd like to end with, can you elaborate on the psychological tests that you've given Nano in the past?
Yes, I would always give him the MMSE, also known as the Mini Mental State Examination. And this is one of the most common tests for dementia, and it has a maximum score of 30. A score of 20 to 24 indicates mild dementia. A score of 13 to 20 indicates moderate dementia. And a score of anything below 13 indicates severe dementia. Now, this test is to provide a few signs of dementia, but if someone has a few signs of dementia, it does not automatically mean that they have dementia. And we're all human and we all make mistakes, but I never recall a time that Nano ever got a score below 25 on his MMSE.
Perfect. That's all I have. No further questions. Thank you.
Ask the witness.
That's the witness.
Cross-examination.
Your Honor. Good afternoon, Ms. Claude. I'm going to ask you a few questions if that's all right with you.
We lose a witness?
Sorry, can you say that again?
Yes. Good afternoon, Ms. Claude. I'm going to ask you a few questions if that's all right with you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Claude, you worked as Nano's personal physician, is that correct?
Yes.
And you worked with him for around 5 years, correct?
Yes.
You also attended Texoma University, correct?
At one point, yes.
And you graduated in the top 25% of the quartile, correct?
Yes.
After that, you attended Granada Medical School, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you then completed your residency at Dedman Medical Center in Dallas, correct?
Correct.
After attending medical school, you began working at the walk-in clinic, is that right?
Yes, after I completed my residency.
And while working at this clinic, you were investigated for Medicare fraud, correct?
Yes.
You did not have a particular medical specialty, is that right?
I practice general medicine.
Okay. In fact, you were charged 5 separate times with Medicare fraud, correct?
I was investigated but never charged.
Let's move on. You've known Nano for a few years, correct?
Many years.
And upon rekindling, he offered you a job as his personal physician, right?
Yes.
And he paid you $250,000 every year plus reimbursement for all your expenses, correct?
Correct.
In fact, that was triple your prior salary. Is that right?
Yes.
Along with this, you would only see him once a week, usually, correct?
Yes.
And out of all of the employees, Mr. Design had you interacted with Alex Chern Eubanks the most. Is that right?
Come again?
And out of all of the employees Mr. Design had, you interacted with Alex Chern Eubanks the most, correct?
Yes.
You claim that Alex would do everything for Nano, correct?
I'd say so.
So when you would have your weekly checkups with Mr. Design, was Ms. Eubanks present most of the time?
Can you say that again?
So when you would have your weekly checkups with Mr. Design, was Ms. Eubanks present most of the time?
Objection, relevance.
Your Honor, I'm just trying to establish whether Alex Chern Eubanks was I'm sorry, Your Honor, can I confer with my co-counsel?
Okay,
Thank you.
quickly. You ready?
Yes, Your Honor. I'm just trying to establish the relationship within Terry Cloth and Alex Chern Eubanks.
And what fact that is of consequence in determining this action is more or less probable because of that relationship?
I'm sorry,
Well, the
I
test,
couldn't hear.
yeah, Rule 401, the test of relevancy, it must have a tendency to make a fact more or less probable. That is, the fact must be of consequence in determining the action. How does the relationship, whether it exists or doesn't, of consequence in determining the action? Why is it important that I know the jury knows the relationship?
We can just move on, Your Honor.
I'm not trying to intimidate you. I just want you to articulate what it is how that matters to the jury.
Well, I'm just trying to establish whether Nano Design and Alex Chern Eubanks had a close relationship.
Okay, overruled.
As you said, you only interacted with Mr. Design an average of 1 time a week, correct?
Typically.
So you do not have extensive knowledge of Nano Design's interactions with Miss Eubanks, correct?
Only some.
Okay, thank you. You performed your last physical on Nano Design on October 2nd, correct?
Come again?
You performed your last physical of Nano Design on October 2nd, correct?
Yes.
And is it correct that Nano presented lower than ideal lung capacity during this test?
No.
Um, I'm sorry. So it is your testimony that Nano Design did not present lower than ideal lung capacity during this test. Correct?
Hmm?
So it is your testimony that Nano Design did not present lower than ideal lung capacity during this test, correct?
Correct.
Do you remember giving a witness statement prior to this trial?
Prior to this trial?
Correct.
I mean, I'm in this trial now.
Yes, I'm saying, do you remember giving a witness statement prior to the trial?
I gave a statement, yes.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with the witness statement?
Yes, you may.
If they have a copy.
Or do you guys have a copy of the witness statement for Terry Cloth?
Should have one.
Yes.
You have to show to them.
This is a witness statement. It's page number 4. Oh, page 25, I'm so sorry.
Line 2 and 3.
Line 2 and 3. In this witness statement, I'm so sorry. You recognize this document as a witness statement you gave on 27th of January of 2023, correct?
Hmm?
You recognize this witness statement as the one you gave on the 27th of January of 2023, correct?
I can't see which one that is. My witness statement is somewhere else, and the one right there is a little bit far away.
That's fine.
This is your signature.
This is your signature, isn't it?
Yes, that is my signature.
And it says it was sworn before a notary public, correct?
Correct.
And this was on the 27th of January of 2023.
Mm.
And in this witness statement, you said, while that came back lower than ideal, it was still technically within normal ranges.
Yes.
Isn't that right?
Yes.
So you do mention that it came back lower than ideal.
But it was still in a good range.
But it was still lower than ideal, which was my question, correct?
Correct.
Thank you. While performing the physical test, Nano took a rather hard fall, didn't he?
Yes.
And this fall would ultimately give him poor and inconclusive results. Is that right?
Hmm? Can you say that again?
And this fall would ultimately give him poor and inconclusive results. Is that right?
Well, I stopped the test.
Yes, but it would give him inconclusive results, correct? Since it wasn't finished.
Correct.
And this would also end your examination, correct?
Correct.
And so, Ms. Claude, were all of the elements of the physical completed after the fall?
For what?
Were all of the elements of the physical completed after the fall? Did you continue your tests after Mr. Design fell off the treadmill?
I finished the test.
Okay, yet, even with the inconclusive results, you still passed him. Is that correct?
He was doing fine.
Yes, but your results were inconclusive because the physical wasn't finished. Is that correct?
Correct.
Ms. Claude, we've seen the topic of Mr. Design's mental health come up a lot in this case. Is that right?
Yes, it has come up.
And would you say that you were qualified to make any conclusions about Nano, even when you're not a licensed psychologist or psychiatrist?
Well, I did the mini mental state examination on him.
Correct, but you are a general practitioner, is that correct?
Yes, I am
And not a psychologist or psychiatrist, correct?
correct.
So you did not go to school to be a psychologist, is that right?
Correct, but I can see when he's like crazy or not. Like I can know.
Objection.
However,
What's the
The
objection?
answer, the question's already been asked and answered.
I'll allow a little latitude. Moving along, counsel.
we can move on, Your Honor. And you can diagnose somebody of a mental illness, correct? Because you're a general practitioner.
Correct.
With this clear then, would you agree that all of the comments made during the physicals and the checkups with Nano were just assumptions you made from your own perspective and could have avoided a real diagnosis?
What about diagnosis?
Would you agree that all the comments made during the physicals and checkups with Nano were just assumptions and personal, and made from your own perspective and could have avoided a real diagnosis?
Well, what I said had logic behind it from what I've studied.
But you are not a licensed psychologist,
I'm not
correct?
a psychologist, no.
Thank you, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Redirect? No. Okay. Plaintiff, call your next witness, please.
Your Honor, we'd like to call Jackie Long to the stand.
All right. Just a second. Proceed.
Could you please introduce yourself to the jury?
My name is Jackie Long, and I am 50 years old.
And what's your highest education?
I'm a graduate of the Naval Academy in Texoma.
And how long did you serve?
I served for roughly 24 years, about 20 of that in the Naval Special Forces as a diver.
And did you receive any badges or honors during your service?
Yes, during a pretty recently declassified or partially declassified operation, I destroyed an enemy warship at great risk to myself, and I was awarded the Medal of Valor for that.
Thank you for your service. Could you describe your medical experience with oxygen deprivation?
Sure. So I had an interest in that actually developed out of that declassified operation because I was declared clinically dead for about 2 minutes during it from oxygen deprivation. And after that, and as a part, of my normal experience as a special forces diver, and recently for the past 4 years as a diving instructor, I've had a lot of experience with the medical circumstances surrounding being deprived.
Objection, Your Honor.
State the objection.
The witness is narrating.
All right.
Your Honor, he's simply just answering the question in his experience.
All right, let's try to break it up a little bit, counsel. I'm going to sustain the objection. Problem with the narrative is you go on and on. It cuts off the opportunity for opposing counsel to interject an objection as some particular area is covered. When you ask the question, they know what's coming. So I'll
Yes, Your
sustain
Honor.
the objection.
What is your primary involvement in the case?
I was Nano's diving instructor.
And where did you do the training for Nano?
We did the training at as I recall, it was a naval facility in Texoma Harbor.
And was it provided on location or based on pay?
Nano actually cut a check to the Navy to pay the cost of renting out the facility. As it recalls, about $52,000. So he provided it. Yeah.
And how much did you receive?
As I recall, Nano paid me about $300,000 for 3 weeks of training.
And when did you begin training him?
So I first met him in person and gave him, a couple of assessments on October 1st, and then we began our training on October 4th.
Was he on track with his course?
On track would be a understatement. He was powering through just about every challenge I could throw at him.
And based on your experience, could you further explain the training you guys underwent?
Sure. So initially, Nano had wanted, very basic scuba diving type training, but he blew that assessment out of the water. So he asked for some more intense. I think he asked explicitly for special forces and breath work, and so we worked on that. We worked on a lot of more intense drills, like underwater disorientation drills, where your oxygen runs out. You're not aware that it's run out. You're disoriented at the bottom of the pool. You have to swim back to the surface, without panicking. He aced that. He aced a lot of other of these very difficult challenges. Honestly, in my experience, the guy probably could have been a special forces diver himself.
And what was y'all's relationship like?
I mean, it was your typical instructor-student relationship, nothing really out of the ordinary, other than he was an
Objection,
exception.
Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Question calls for narration.
Overruled.
Your Honor, I'm just asking my client what his relationship was like with this character that he's giving his opinion on.
I overrule the objection.
So what was y'all's relationship like, if you could continue?
Sure, it was normal. I mean, did nothing out of the ordinary. The guy was just uncommonly talented at this field of work.
Did you ever experience anything that could have suggested a lapse in memory?
Not to my recollection.
And did you notice anything strange in his behavior?
I mean, my personal impression was that the guy may not have been, the most social type. Billionaires might not get around all the time, but other than that, there was nothing really serious or really concerning,
And now, Your Honor, we would like to admit Exhibit 8.
Are you offering Exhibit 8?
Yes, are there any objections?
Uh,
I'm handing you what's been previously marked as Exhibit 8. Could you identify it for me?
This is a transcript. This is a retrieval of messages between me and another employee of the Dive and Survive scuba diving training company where I work, Sidley Jung.
And is it an original or a copy?
This is, I believe this is a correct copy.
And is Exhibit 8 a true and correct copy?
Yes.
Plaintiff offers Exhibit 8.
the objection?
So you meant,
Objection.
Okay, what's your objection?
This exhibit is hearsay.
Your Honor, this exhibit is not considered hearsay under Rule 8011B. It is an exception to hearsay because it is consistent with the declarant's testimony.
I dropped the objection.
So you mentioned in this testimony that Nano was a machine. Could you add or explain that?
I mean, I think the guy was a machine because again, he was dominating just about every challenge I could throw at him. I put him in a blackout mask. He was able to swim just fine in that. He was able to deal with all these situations that are quite stressful, quite dangerous, without much of a problem. So yeah, he was a machine in the water.
Yeah,
Okay, thank you for coming here today. We passed the witness.
all right. Do you want a ruling on Exhibit 8? Yes, when you offered it, I have not said it's admitted yet. You probably want to find.
Yes.
Yes, it's admitted. Okay.
Thank you.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor. Hello, Mr. Lung. I'm going to ask you some questions if you don't mind.
Not at all.
Just to clarify to the jury, you served in the Navy, correct?
That is correct, yeah.
And while you were there, you learned in the specific training courses you performed with Mr. Design, correct?
I'm sorry, I'm not quite sure I understood that question. Would you mind rephrasing it?
While you were in the Navy, you learned the specific training courses that you performed with Mr. Design.
Yeah, I mean, that's where I got a lot of my experience. That's where I got my experience to teach a diving instruction course, yeah.
And the specific training included stressful and strenuous procedures, correct?
Yep.
And you have performed the procedures with many other people, correct?
I wouldn't necessarily say it's many other people. I don't always, not most people aren't nearly as skilled as Nano, so it's not necessarily an uncommon thing, but I wouldn't say this is the first time I've done this.
And but Mr. Design has a very different reaction than what you would expect, right?
Oh yeah, definitely.
In fact, you said he was very calm throughout the entire process, correct?
Yep.
You mentioned that you were not aware Nano was going on a submersible dive opposed to a scuba dive, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
You also mentioned in your statement that the breathing techniques you taught Nano was also taught to Jesse from colleagues of yours, correct?
That would be my assumption based on my experience as a diving instructor in the Texoma region, yeah.
So would you say that Jesse Watkins had practically the same training that Mr. Design did?
I would say that's more likely than not, given that IHT or intermittent hypoxic training isn't a particularly uncommon type training. Most instructors around these parts do it. Yeah.
You also mentioned that the training you taught Nano wasn't a productive use of his time, correct?
I mean, obviously not, physically swimming probably wasn't the most productive thing if he's not going to get out of the submarine. No, but I would say things like intermittent hypoxic training are pretty widely applicable.
And you said this because it would be impossible to make the oxygen supply last long enough for rescue, correct?
I mean, yeah, there's no way they could have made the oxygen supply. As I recall, it took them about 6 days. I highly doubt they could have made the oxygen supply last that long, but that doesn't mean they couldn't have, decreased the amount of oxygen they uptook.
And you also said that all the breathing training would do is help Mr. Design remain more composed, correct?
It would help him remain more composed, but it also would. That's not the only thing I said. I said that it would likely decrease the percentage.
Will suffice, Mr. Lung.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
A yes or no will suffice, Mr. Lung.
I mean, no, that's not the only thing I said. I said that it would also help decrease his oxygen intake.
Is it true that submersible operators and passengers are required to have further education and training to be on a submersible such as the Tutu, correct?
I'm not an expert on submersibles, but that sounds pretty reasonable to me, yeah.
So the training you completed with Nano was not enough for a major submersible dive like the Tutu, correct?
I mean, it wouldn't be enough for him to operate the submersible, but Nano wasn't the only one on the sub, yeah.
You claim that in your opinion, the 48-hour supply of oxygen lasted much longer than the 48 hours it was supposed to, correct?
Yeah, I think that's pretty reasonable.
You've never operated a submersible of the Tutu's model, correct?
No, but I have been in lots of environments where there's low oxygen, and I know what IHT does to a person.
Matter of fact, you haven't operated any submersible, correct?
I don't recall mentioning that, but again, I don't think that's relevant to the efficacy of IHT.
So you do not have the proper qualifications to measure how fast or slow the oxygen supply ran out, correct?
No, I would strongly disagree with that. I think I do have the proper qualifications to determine whether or not intermittent hypoxic training has an effect on someone's oxygen consumption.
You also mentioned that the effects of hypoxia on the human body are impaired judgment, muscle confusion, as well as
makes it difficult for someone to have rational thoughts and makes rational and controlled movement, correct?
Yeah, when you undergo hypoxia. Yeah.
Thank you, Your Honor, we pass.
Plaintiff, call your next witness.
We would like to call Leclerc to the stand.
Proceed.
Would you please state your name and age for the court?
My name is Chris Leclerc and I am 37 years old.
What is your occupation?
I am the CEO and managing director of operations at the Aquatic Center for Exploration, which most of us tend to call ACE.
Why is it called ACE?
Well, that's the abbreviation I gave it, Aquatic Center for Exploration, so ACE.
Is it called that often?
I would say most of the time, yes. Everybody tends to call it ACE, because it's just easier than having to say the full name.
What did you do before joining ACE?
Well, I worked for a company called Mills Maritime Machines in Australia.
What did you do there?
Well, I was a captain of one of their vessels, which was called the Stingray, and I did probably at least 100 missions there.
What did you do next?
Well, I became a director of operations because I wanted to work on more of the business side.
Objection, Your Honor.
Make the objection.
Your Honor, this is not relevant to the case at hand.
Response.
Your Honor, I am simply trying to provide the knowledge of deep sea explorations.
I'm going to overrule the objection. I think a little bit of history to evaluate the credibility of the witness is allowed.
So when did you start working at ACE?
Well, in 2016, they began trying to hire me, and like I said, in 2016, I finally decided to go work with them, and I became the CEO and managing director for them.
So what was your job here?
Well, we began creating submersibles and testing them to discover more about the ocean of what we didn't know yet. This is actually how I met Nano.
Wait, so how did you meet Nano?
Well, so out of nowhere, he just began contacting me multiple times. He said he wanted to go on one of the test dives, which was the deepest one. This last one was 6,000 meters or about 20,000 feet.
Can you please tell me how you observed his behavior?
Well, he was acting kind of strange. I mean, he was very determined to go on this dive, and he called me at strange hours of the night, but I could tell he was a very smart man. I mean, how else would somebody make all that money?
So what happened next?
Well, he continued to call me, and I knew he shouldn't go on it, but he had clearly studied so much on the tutu, and he knew almost more than I did on it. So I finally decided to let him go.
So why did you let him go?
Because I knew how smart he was. I had seen how much knowledge he had on the tutu, and I thought with his brain and with Jesse's experience, I thought surely, I mean, they'd do just fine.
So what happened in the days leading up to the dive?
Well, so I had Nano come visit multiple times to study the tutu even deeper so he would be very experienced. And I had Jesse trained, and Nano also had scuba diving experience, so he had some experience in the water.
So can you tell us about the prior dives?
So there were 4 prior dives. The first one was 500 meters. The second one was 1,500 meters. The third one was 3,000 meters. And then the fourth one, 4,500 meters. And I mean, the 2-2 passed it with flying colors. And we were very confident that we were going to make it in this last one.
So can you tell us what happened during this dive?
So we went down, and Nano and Jesse were communicating with us through the Bravo, our command ship, that was communicating with the 2-2. And at about 1,000 meters, I took a break and went and relaxed. And I got a call a few minutes later, and it's
Objection, Your Honor.
Make the objection.
The witness is narrating.
Yeah, break it down, counsel. Ask separate questions, please.
Yes, Your Honor. So can you tell us what happened when you lost contact with the 2-2?
Yes, so they called me, and I was very concerned. It was about 3 hours into the dive. But I thought that, or I knew that they still had some control of the vessel from the inside. So I knew that they would probably be safe.
So what happened in the days after the loss of the communication?
Well, so on November 3rd, we continued trying to get in contact with them so that we could try and help them. And on November 3rd, we had a little bit of communication, and we could hear like almost banging inside the vessel. And so
Sorry.
we hoped that they were still alive.
So what happened when y'all finally found them? Like,
So unfortunately, on November 7th, we had discovered that they had passed from the lack of oxygen. And we had found Nano clutching a red notebook that I had previously seen him before he went on the dive with.
so how did you feel when you found out?
Man, I was so disappointed, and because we had so much confidence and so much hope that they would make it because of how smart they were. And we had discovered that the ballasts hadn't been released. And 3 hours in, I mean, they could have released the ballasts and come back up, but we were so disappointed that that was the outcome of it.
So you mentioned a notebook, which has been previously admitted into evidence. Mr. Leclerc, do you recognize this as Exhibit 1G?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
So can you tell us what the notebook said?
Well, so it said that Nano forgave us, Ace, in his notebook, and that he's leaving his possessions to us.
Objection, Your Honor.
Make the objection.
The witness is speculating.
Sustain.
Your Honor, we move to strike that testimony from the record.
It's stricken from the record.
Thank you, Your Honor.
So is what you observed in the notebook shocking?
Yes, I was surprised by it, but I mean, we didn't have any control of the situation, I don't believe. But
Yes.
we will still continue to explore in honor of Nano's bravery and Jesse's experience with the company.
Your Honor, we pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Mr. Leclerc. Is it okay if I ask you a few questions today?
Yes, sir.
You said you work for the Aquatic Center for Exploration, correct?
Yes, sir, I do.
And you're actually the CEO of the company, correct?
I am.
And you're also the Director of Testing Compliance?
That would be correct.
Okay. And so would you say that you have a clear understanding of the rules and expectations surrounding the submersible business and who is allowed on a submersible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And would you also say that you've been working and surrounded by the sea for your entire life?
I have been, yes, it's like my one true love.
And so prior to the events surrounding the tutu, you didn't have any business with Nano Design, is that correct?
No, sir, not until he first contacted me.
And before that point, you had never met Nano, correct?
I hadn't, but I had heard that he was very rich and very intelligent.
But you hadn't talked to him prior to the events of the starting the tutu submersible, correct?
Not before he contacted me, no.
And he first contacted you on September 25th about the submersible, correct?
Yes, he did. He wanted to go on the dive.
And you testified that you don't have any knowledge about how he would know about the submersible, correct?
No, I mean, he knew just about everything about it.
But you don't know how he knew that, correct?
Correct.
And at first you were hesitant about allowing Nano on the submersible, correct?
Yes, because I knew that it wasn't allowed, but with his knowledge, I knew that he would be okay.
And so as you've just stated, you knew that Mr. Design was not supposed to be allowed on the tutu because he was a civilian, is that correct? And it hadn't completed all the necessary tests.
That is what I said, yes.
Okay. But after money was involved, you changed your mind, correct?
Well, also after he established his knowledge of the vessel.
Okay. But in fact, after you expressed that you were hesitant, Nano deposited $100 million in the Aquatic Center's financial account. Is that correct?
He did, yes.
And you said, normally I would also have said that person would need to fork up at least 10 million bucks too. Quote, end quote. Is that correct?
I did. Well, yes, sir. Well, we were actually asking for 50 million, but he made it 10 million.
So he went above and beyond by giving you double that amount, correct?
Yes, he did.
And Mr. Leclerc, do you remember receiving the wire transfer for that $100 million?
I do, yes, sir.
Your Honor, may I approach the witness with what has been marked for identification purposes as exhibit number 3?
Yes.
Let the record reflect, I am showing a copy to opposing counsel. And do you have a copy of it in front of you?
Yes, sir, I do.
Awesome. I now hand you what has been identified, marked for identification purposes as exhibit number 3. Would you please identify it for me?
Yes, sir. This is the message I got when we received the money from Nano Design.
Yes, sir. And is the wire transfer attached to this email?
Yes, sir, it is.
And is it a fair and accurate representation of the entire wire transfer and email?
Yes, sir.
Your Honor, at this time, we offer exhibit number 3 into evidence.
Any objection?
No, Your Honor.
Admitted.
Thank you. Do you remember sending the email that we can see on exhibit number 3?
Yes, sir, I do.
Okay. And will you please read along with me as I read the last 3 sentences starting at, quote, if there's money?
Let me see. Yes, sir.
Quote, if there's money to be made, we need to make sure we get a share, but otherwise keep this top secret. Even the Navy cannot find out about this. End quote. Did I read that correctly, Mr. Leclerc?
Yes, that's what it says.
And so you decided not to inform the Texoma Navy about the submersible dive, correct?
Well, they were not knowledgeable about Nano's experience with the vessel.
But is it true that Nano being on that vessel was not allowed?
No, but like I said, they didn't know how intelligent he was with this topic.
Moving on. Nano was not authorized to be on the submersible on the day of the dive, correct?
That's correct.
And the submersible, and that's because the submersible had not yet passed the necessary safety tests to be used by civilians, correct?
It had passed the first four, but not on
But to the dive depth that the Tutu was going to go that day, it had not yet passed that test, correct?
No, that's why they were taking it in the first place.
So despite Nano not having the required training and the submersible not having passed all the necessary safety tests, you still authorized the mission. Is that correct?
Well, besides his knowledge of it, no.
Okay, but Nano Design did not have the necessary training that he would need to go on a submersible dive to that depth, correct?
Well, we trained him with the vessel and he had multiple other lessons. So I do believe he was prepared for this situation.
So considering your years of experience and the elements around the sub and your knowledge of the law and rules surrounding the launch of the Tutu submersible, would you agree that it was against the procedure to allow the launch of the submersible in the first place?
Could you break down the question a little, please?
Sure. So given your years of experience with the rules surrounding submersibles, would you agree that it was against procedure to allow Nano Design to be on the submersible the day it dived?
Besides his knowledge of it, yes.
Thank you. Your Honor, at this time, we pass the witness.
All right. Are y'all ready to go to the defense side, or we need a brief recess? Does anyone need a recess?
Your Honor, we would like maybe a 3-minute recess, if that's okay.
That's fine. Let's do 5 because I'm a little
5, okay.
different than that.
All right, thank you.
We're in recess. Ready? All right. Court's now back in session, unless we're missing somebody. Good. Plaintiff, any more witnesses?
No, Your Honor.
Okay. You rest? Plaintiff rest?
Yes, Your Honor. Plaintiff rests.
Defense, call your first witness.
We would like to call Dr. Max Northshire to the stand.
All right. Proceed.
Good afternoon. Could you please state your name for the jury?
Yes, of course. Greetings. My name is Dr. Max Northshire.
Could you please tell me a little bit about yourself, Dr. Northshire?
Yes, I'm 45 years old and I'm a proud mother of my two outstanding children, Bo and Sam, which both stand at the top 3% in highly competitive in a private high school.
Dr. Northshire, what do you specialize in?
I'm a specialist in cognitive neuroscience.
Could you tell me your educational background, Dr. Northshire?
Certainly. I graduated from Yale University in 1999 with a triple major in psychology, neuroscience, and forensics. Then 4 years later, I obtained my PhD from Harvard in cognitive neuroscience. I truly have a passion for my studies.
Are you currently employed in any of these fields?
I joined the Texoma Bureau of Investigation in their behavioral analysis unit after I graduated from Yale. Then I worked in TBI for 12 years.
Have you handled any cases that contain the case of oxygen loss similar to Mr. Design's, Dr. Northshire?
In my work field, I have had to deal with numerous cases that are rooted from oxygen loss, more precisely how oxygen loss affects mental behavior.
Could you explain to me what your work field is?
It is quite complicated, but yes. Cognitive neuroscience focuses on the biological process and aspects underlying the human cognition, as well as forensics handwriting analysis related to diagnosing a patient's state of mind.
Why are you testifying in this case today, Dr. Northshire?
Well, I was initially hired by Alex Eubanks' attorney to confirm whether the pages of the small red notebook were written by Mr. Design.
Could you please tell me what it is you discovered from your studies in the red notebook?
It was quite difficult at first since Nano was known not to have anything in writing, but after countless comparisons to several of his signatures, I was able to confirm that the writing in the notebooks was in fact written by Nano.
Were you able to study the other pages of evidence?
Yes, and I confirmed that Exhibit 12 was written by Jesse Watkins and based to prior writings that I used of and also based on prior writings that I used of Jesse Watkins.
Objection.
State the objection.
There is lack of foundation for this. Objection. This is not offered as an expert witness.
All right, you're objecting that there's no foundation laid or not enough foundation laid for this witness to give the opinion. What's the reason?
No, I'm saying that it has not been offered yet. There is lack of foundation for this. There is foundation, but it has not been offered for this testimony.
Is there a response?
Can I confer with my co-counsel if you don't?
Yes. Quickly. You ready?
Can you clarify your objection? Because
Yes, the foundation has been laid for him to be an expert witness, though he has not been asked yet or offered. Sorry, my bad.
All right. I think the question or I think the objection is that Dr. Northshire has not been tendered as an expert. That's
Yes, Your
the
Honor.
question. All right. I'm sorry, guys, but where I practice, that's not the practice. So I'm not sure what to do with that. Why don't we just roll on? If you've got an objection to the qualifications or to the basis of the opinion or the analytical gap, if there is one, make those objections, but I'm going to overrule the requirement that there be a tender. Proceed, defendants.
Your Honor. If you concluded that Nana was already experiencing signs of dementia before the dive to the Ellie, were any of these behavioral patterns present when Nana was in the tutu?
There was significant corroborating evidence during the submersible dive that showed that Nano lacked the capacity to compose and comprehend a holographic will.
Please elaborate more on what the evidence specifically was.
Yes. So firstly, we have to view the scientific and medical angle of the situation.
Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Well, if we examine the evidence, the day that the tutu was first entered the waters all the way until the day it ran out of oxygen, it is clear that the tutu was releasing oxygen slowly throughout the dive. This means that the effects of the oxygen loss were drew out over a longer period of time.
Thank you, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Dr. Northshire, my bad. Dr. Northshire, may I please ask you some questions?
Yes.
Dr. Northshire, are you aware that you've made a testimony beforehand?
Yes.
Are you aware that in this testimony you have said that it would have been impossible for Nano to survive 48 hours, 25% longer than 48 hours of oxygen that had been supplied?
Yes.
And may I just ask, actually, let me go back. May I actually please show the already submitted Exhibit 2?
Yes.
Your Honor, may I please show the already submitted Exhibit 2?
Oh, yes, sure.
Here it is. Do you have a copy, Dr. Northshire, with you?
Yes, I do.
Can you look under the specifications on the right side, the top one?
Yes.
It says max oxygen 48 hours for 3 average sized adults. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, can you please tell me, I'm sure you're very familiar with this whole case, but were there 3 adult men on this tutu?
No.
There were 2, correct?
Yes.
And I do not believe that you are familiar with how oxygen is measured. Is that correct?
Objection, Your Honor.
The objection.
Badgering the witness.
I
Overruled.
will retract my question.
This is cross-examination. Go ahead.
But let me ask, would that, in your opinion, Dr. Shai, would that be more than enough oxygen for 2 people for 48 hours of oxygen for 3 average sized adults?
Yes.
Okay. And also I'd like to say, let me just make sure, you claimed in your testimony that the effects of the dwindling oxygen would have been somewhat gradual in the tutu and likely unknown to Nano as it was happening. Is this correct?
Yes.
But then didn't you later state that Nano was succumbing to traumatic mental stress brought by the dwindling oxygen and the realization that he would soon suffocate inside the tutu?
That is correct.
So by stating that Nano was both aware and not aware of the dwindling oxygen, you are contradicting yourself, right?
That is correct. Oh.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
All right. Defendant, brother. Call your next witness.
Your Honor, the defense would like to call Will I Handle It to the stand.
Proceed.
Good evening. Could you please state your name for the court?
Good evening. The name is Will I Handlet, but most known me as The Handle.
What do you do for a living, Miss Handlet?
Well, I'm a lawyer for Texoma City, where our firm just doesn't get it done. It gets it handled.
And where did you earn your law degree?
The one and only Stanford Law.
And do you know a person by the name of Nano Design?
Of course. We met by accident several years ago while sitting in a first-class flight to New York City. I had just passed the bar exam 3 days prior, and let me tell you, I handled him, tying him down as a client.
And how often would you interact with Nano Design with him being your client?
Oh, constantly. Me and Nano were together in lockstep for the past 6 years. I would constantly advise him on the legal doings of his business, keeping him safe from the people that wanted to bring him down.
And how exactly were you professionally involved with Mr. Design?
Well, Mr. Design named me as his estate lawyer in 2017. I was in charge of handling all the money folks that wanted to pay for Nano's ideas.
And as his estate lawyer, what kind of things were you in charge of?
Well, I handled many things as Nano's estate lawyer, but perhaps the main thing was his will, which changed all the time.
And how exactly did you craft Nano's will?
Well, we would sit down and he would tell me the entities or beneficiaries that he wanted his money to go to if he were to pass.
And did he ever have to revise his will?
Well, the list of beneficiaries, what we would like to call the list, changed all the time. We set up weekly meetings at the Nano Tower to check in on his will because his changes were unpredictable.
With respect to attorney-client privilege, what kind of changes did Nano routinely make?
Well, everything depended on what Nano was feeling at the moment. He would add a few random people every once in a while, or include a group he was recently fixated on what he believed would change the world.
And how often would those on the list of beneficiaries stay on the list?
Well, very few of those on the will lasted longer than 1 or 2 revisions.
And in this ever-changing will, was there anyone who was consistently named a beneficiary?
Yes, Nano's valet, Alex Chern Eubanks, was consistently included on the list.
Ms. Handlet, did Mr. Design ever give 100% or all of his assets to one individual or entity?
No, in my years as his estate lawyer, he never once gave everything he had to one organization or person. He always had a long list of people and groups he wanted his money to go to.
During any of these changes that he would make, was the Aquatic Center for Exploration ever mentioned or put into the will?
No.
Now that we know that Nano kept his will updated, when was the last time he asked you to make changes to his will?
Well, the last list I made for Nano was on October 15th, 2022.
If you were presented with a copy of this will, would you be able to identify it?
Of course.
Your Honor, I would like to approach the witness with what has been marked for identification purposes as exhibit number 5.
You may approach.
Thank you, Your Honor. Let the record reflect I am showing a copy to opposing counsel. You guys can see it. Do you have a copy in front of you?
Yes, I do.
Ms. Handlet, could you please identify this document for the jury?
Sure. This is a list of beneficiaries and percentages, charity trust, or a copy of Nano's will.
And when was this will created?
It was created on October 15th, 2022.
Thank you. And is it an accurate and genuine copy of the list of beneficiaries that has not been altered in any way?
Yes, it is.
And it was you that created this list of beneficiaries with Nano Design, correct?
Sure it was. Sure was.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit number 5 into evidence.
Hold on a second. I'm using somebody else's computer. Well, that's good. Counsel, I apologize. The phone was ringing here when it shouldn't have.
Oh,
So go back after it was a true and correct a copy. It hasn't been altered anyway, and then I lost it.
Yes, sir. And was it you that created this will with Nano Design?
Sure was.
Your Honor, we offer exhibit number 5 into evidence.
Any objection?
Yes, Your Honor. We object that it is irrelevant as it has nothing to do with the new will. It is just an old copy.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Please.
Your Honor, this is fully irrelevant as it goes to Nano Design's long history of revising his wills and the trends that he would make in crafting these wills. Your Honor, we believe that this is relevant because the prior wills are A, what's the will would default to should this court find that the aquatic center is not the new will in the submersible was made while Nano was not mentally competent, and B, it is also represents a trend in Nano's prior will crafting.
The objection's overruled. Exhibit 5 is admitted.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can you please walk me through this last meeting you had with Nano Design on October 15th?
Well, after I arrived at the tower, Nano took control like usual. He told me the names and numbers, and I printed them out for him. And he carefully reviewed the list, as he always did, and I watched him sign.
What kind of beneficiaries did Nano have for his will and testament on October 15th?
Well, he had a bunch of niche organizations on that little piece of paper. A group like Operation Kindness, Rexford Solutions, and Save the Polar Bears were all listed as part of his will on October 15th.
Thank you. And would you say that Nano was deeply invested in various causes and organizations?
Absolutely. Nano had an extreme passion for many things that I lost track of them at times.
And was there any entity that was routinely a part of his will and testament?
Yes, one beneficiary that was consistently listed in Nano's will was Alex Cherny-Eubanks, his assistant and his valet.
Thank you. And did you ever encounter Alex Cherny-Eubanks during your time as Nano's estate lawyer?
Well, I met her a few times, but only whenever she was with Nano. He would routinely refer to her as his ace in the hole and "you're my ace valet." Alex, funny nicknames like that. I could tell they were close.
Objection, Your Honor. Hearsay.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Yes.
Your Honor, the declarant is unavailable. What the witness is referring to is what Nano Design said to Alex Cherny-Eubanks, not what Alex Cherny-Eubanks said to Nano Design.
Okay.
Your Honor, that's still saying something that was an out-of-court statement.
Your Honor, Nano Design is unavailable for trial today. Therefore, it is an exception to hearsay.
What rule is the exception?
Let me find it for you. It's the declarant unavailable exception. Give me a second.
Well, it's not former testimony. It's not under the belief of imminent death. Not a statement against interest. I don't see it as a statement of personal family history. Do you have any other exception?
Yes, Your Honor. Rule 804, subpoint A1. I'm sorry, yeah. Subject, Rule 804.A. The criteria for being unavailable, the declarant is considered to be unavailable as a witness if the defendant is absent from the trial or hearing and the statement's proponent has not been able by process or by other reasonable means to procure the declarant's attendance. In this case, it's because Nano Design has passed on.
Well, I agree with you that under Rule 804A, a design is not available. But under 804B, that's where we have to focus because the following are not excluded by the rule against hearsay if the declarant is unavailable. So given he's unavailable, then you have a list of 6, well, 5, because number 5 is not applicable. You have a list of what can come into evidence. And as I said, former testimony, the city former testimony. Belief of imminent death, that probably applies to other documents, but not this one, not this statement. Statement against interest, I don't see that as a statement against interest. Statement of family with personal history, or offer against a party that wrongfully caused the declarant unavailability. I don't see that here.
Your Honor.
Help me on that. Tell me what.
Your Honor, we do not believe that the former testimony rule applies to that because the testimony that Nano Design gave was not made as a witness at a trial hearing or legal lawful deposition.
All right. I don't want to take up a whole lot more time. Based on our discussion of what your specific objection is, I'm going to overrule it. I will say that I think you might look at that a little deeper before you get to the competition. But based on what you said, overrule.
Thank you. Let me restart the question. Ms. Handelit, did you ever encounter Alex Trent Eubanks during your time as Nano's estate lawyer?
Yes, him and Nano were very close. I met her a few times, but only whenever she was with him. Her.
Thank you, Ms. Handelit. Your Honor, at this time, we would like to publish exhibit number 5 to the jury.
All right, consider it virtually published.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Handelit, Nano Design never once gave his assets. Did Nano Design ever give all his assets to one beneficiary?
He mentioned it several times throughout the years, but I always advised against it.
Objection, Your Honor, leading.
Your Honor, I recognize that, and I reworded the question in a way that it was not leading.
Withdraw the question and try again.
Thank you, Your Honor. I'll re-say the question. Did Nano Design ever once give all his assets to one beneficiary?
No, he mentioned it several times throughout the years, but I always advised against it, so he never went through with it.
And why was this?
Well, I believed it was way too crazy and complicated, especially for a man of his caliber.
And in these discussions, did he ever name the beneficiary that he would choose to pick to be the sole beneficiary of his assets if he were to go through with this plan?
Yes, it was Alex Trent Eubanks.
Thank you, Ms. Handelit. Your Honor, at this time, we pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Okay. You've been Nano's lawyer since 2017, right?
That's correct.
It was right after you had graduated?
Yep.
So would you say you were his best choice?
I mean, I was the choice he found.
Was Nano your best client?
Oh, yeah, I loved him.
And Nano left his money to random people often, correct?
I wouldn't say random people, but a lot of people, yes.
You even said you felt upset by not being included in the will, correct?
Yeah, it hurt me a little bit just because of how close we were.
You said you were surprised not even to be named?
Yeah, I was a little surprised and hurt by it.
I'm sure that's hard, seeing as y'all were very close friends. You even felt resentful, right?
I did feel a little bit of resentment. I mean, who wouldn't?
And you even threw things, right?
Yeah, it was in the heat of the moment, but I did.
So you believe you are the reason that Nano's will held together all these years, right?
I mean, I pretty much crafted it, yes.
And you and Nano met every week to go over the wills?
Yeah, but it was pretty inconsistent, so I would show up every week regardless.
So you both knew the will in detail?
Yes.
And Nano was aware of his money's impact, right?
Yeah, I mean, he was a pretty successful man.
And he was always giving to charities.
Yes, he was very passionate about that.
And would you say that you knew Nano personally?
Yeah, we were close friends.
Did Nano trust you?
I mean, I would hope so. I went through with his will.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
The question calls for speculation.
Can I respond?
Yes.
The question doesn't call for speculation because, as we have already established, that he knows Nano personally, so he can have an opinion based on Nano's personality that he has learned over the years. So, since Nano is not here with us today, it is safe to make an assumption if he trusts him or not.
May I respond, Your Honor?
Okay, quickly. Yes.
Your Honor, the question was not what Ms. Handelet's perception of Nano's trustworthiness was. It was a definite question of which Ms. Handelet does not have definite knowledge on if Mr. Design trusted her completely.
May I respond, Your Honor?
No, I'm going to overrule the objection based on Rule 701. I think this is within the basis of lay opinion rationally based on the witness's perception.
Okay, moving on. Did you trust Nano?
Could you rephrase the question?
Sure. Over this time, did you begin to develop trust for Nano?
Yeah, we worked pretty close all the time, so I did develop some trust.
So, was there anything ever to suggest that he was unstable or mentally unfit?
I honestly wouldn't have any knowledge of that.
Based on all of your time together, there was never one moment to suggest he was unstable?
I mean, unless you count all the times he would change his will and was inconsistent with it, I really wouldn't know anything about that.
But you guys said you met weekly to change the will, right?
Yeah, we did meet weekly to talk about the will, not his mental stability.
Okay, so changing it weekly is not based on that. But would you say there was any, based on your memory, anything that could have suggested he was mentally not there?
No, not really. As I said, we were there to talk about the will and talk about business stuff.
Okay. And you stated that you believe he was thinking clearly while writing out the new will. Is that correct?
Mm-hmm.
And so any edits to his will you believed he understood?
Yeah, we would go through with it pretty thoroughly.
Okay, that's all, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
All right. Defense, defendants, call your next witness.
Yeah, I'm doing
Your Honor, we call Alex Cherny-Banks the stand.
All right.
Good afternoon. Can you state your name for the court, please?
Good afternoon. My name is Alex Chen-Eubanks.
Could you tell me a little bit about yourself, Ms. Eubanks?
Well, I'm 37 years old, and I have a 13-year-old daughter named Claire. I also am currently employed by the Nanos estate while this lawsuit is still pending.
How do you know Mr. Design?
Well, I know Mr. Design since college when we met at MIT in 2010. We were assigned to be in the same dorm room, because he was the smartest person in the room and in a class, of course, everyone would know him. And he really just was the smartest person. He would pass every class that all of us were still taking.
Could you explain your professional relationship with Mr. Design?
Well, I started as his personal assistant and slash valet during college. And after senior year, me with my bachelor's degree and him with many advanced degrees, I continued to be his personal assistant.
Did you have a personal relationship with Mr. Design?
Well, yeah, since I've known Nano since college, and honestly, and because I moved in with him, I've had a close relationship with him. Even since college, I became quite close with him, and it didn't matter that we were personal assistants, he was still one of my closest friends.
Did he call you by any nicknames?
Yeah, well, often he referred me as Ace in many occasions. When we first met at MIT, I let him borrow my handkerchief, and Ace was engraved it with my initials. And then he said, "You are an Ace," and that's the beginning how we became close friends.
Miss Eubanks, as Nano's personal assistant and valet, what did your job entail?
Well, I pretty much did everything for Nano other than business. I handled his schedule, flying him out, appointments, managing the household staff, shopping, selecting Nano's wardrobe. I did everything.
Miss Eubanks, you and Mr. Design were pretty close, correct?
Yes, I would say we were really close.
And Miss Eubanks, do you know or did Mr. Design ever discuss with you any prior medical conditions he had?
Well, Nano was suffering with a few mental problems. He was constantly anxious, would really struggle focusing on work sometimes, and seemed to swing between a manic and repressive state sometimes.
From your perspective of his behavior, how would you describe Nano leading up to the day of his death?
Well, Nano seemed different. Leading up to his death, he was obsessed with the idea of the alley. He would lock himself in his room and then for days and come out like as nothing happened.
You mentioned he was acting a little bit different. Could you elaborate on that?
Well, we once were at the tower garage. Nano said he didn't recognize where we were and he demanded we to go home. I tried to explain to him that we were home, but the only way I could try to calm him down is to take him through a drive and calm it down. But when we returned to the tower, it was like if nothing happened.
Did Mr. Design mention the aquatic center to you?
Well, yes, in fact, on December 30th, 2022, after one of his bad days, he decided we were going to the center without any context.
Do you know when Mr. Design started his physical trainings for the dive?
Well, yes, on October 1st, when I drove him to Dive and Survive, where he went inside and stayed for a couple of hours until I picked him up.
At this time, was there anything about Mr. Design's demeanor that confused you?
Well, yes, originally he told me to go to the center, but when we arrived to the area, he changed his mind and wanted to go to scuba diving company. I inquired that he had snapped at me, which is something he rarely did.
Did you accompany Mr. Design during his trainings or meetings with the aquatic center?
Well, not necessarily. I dropped him off at 7 a.m. At the Texoma Harbor or the Navy's facility, and I would pick him up afterward.
I'm sorry, was there anything from the plaintiff? Is there an
We
objection?
objected to leading.
Overruled.
For which question again?
The question you just asked.
Oh, Your Honor, can I rephrase the question?
Of course, you can rephrase it, but I did overrule the leading objection.
Oh, I'm so sorry. We can move on. Did he ever mention what he was doing at the aquatic center?
I'm so sorry. Okay. Well, not necessarily. Well, he did on sorry. What we did mention, he was at some point he was talking about at the aquatic center. He didn't really mention it much, but he was talking about wanting to go find the Ellie because it was a shit.
Objection, hearsay.
Your Honor, may I respond?
Yes.
The declarant is unavailable.
And
Mr. Nano Design is not in trial today. He has passed on and he cannot testify for this trial.
true, but what is the going after the Ellie? I mean, it's not a statement against interest. How does that fit under the exception of 804?
Your Honor, we can just move on from that question.
Okay.
Ms. Eubanks, during his time preparing for this journey, did Mr. Design begin acting weird?
Well, yes. During mid-October, he told me he didn't want to go to the South Pier anymore and instructed to ignore Jackie Long's calls. It was so sudden, and he seemed very excited about this plan for him to shut everything down.
Ms. Eubanks, when did you learn of Mr. Design's plan with the aquatic center?
It was probably 2 days later. I was driving into my car, and it suddenly became clear that Nana was going to try to find the Ellie, and with the help of the aquatic center.
Miss Eubanks, after finding out what Nano had been up to, did you confront him about the subject?
No, I decided to gather my two assistants and ask them to look into the center and anything that had to do anything with the submarines. I was hoping I could figure out why Nano had been so secretive about it.
Could you elaborate on what you found?
Well, we eventually found that the aquatic center had a few submersibles that could be used to find shipwrecks. They mentioned the specific submersible named Toto, and had been confidential for some time.
Did you find any other relevant information?
Well, yes, one of my assistants found that the two wasn't certified or civilian passengers. It said one more test to undergo. I'm not sure how Nano managed to join.
After finding this information, did you contact anybody about your concerns?
Yeah, I contacted Will and Handler to express my concerns.
What was your impression of Nano at the time?
Well, Nano was acting strange and it was acting out. I was really concerned for him. I truly believe that his current behavior made a huge influence in his obsession with the tutu.
And Miss Eubanks, when was the last time you saw Nano?
The last I saw Nano was October 30th when I drove into the harbor.
When you dropped him off, did you guys have any altercations about his decision to board the tutu?
Yes, well, I tried to change his mind and thus only getting Nano more hysterical, and he even called me a traitor.
Miss Eubanks, what was your reaction when you found out about Nano's death?
I was devastated. The person I considered my best friend died, and the last conversation we had ended up being a fight. Nano didn't deserve to die, and I truly believe that this would have been all avoided if the aquatic center never agreed to Nano joining them into Tutu.
Thank you, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Cross-examination.
Yes, Your Honor.
See.
So by his sophomore year, Nano was paying for both yours and his things, correct?
Yes, but that was all in his goodwill.
Later that year, you both ended up in a 3-bedroom house together, right?
Yes, as Nano was a good person, he offered this.
Then after college, you lived in a 30-floor building called Nano Tower, correct?
Yes, because Nano asked me to be his personal assistant and help him out.
Nano spent most of his time on the top floor, right?
Yes.
So you had the 29 floors to yourself most of the time, correct?
Well, yes, because I was working on most of the things that he wanted to as his personal assistant.
Objection, unresponsive after yes.
Yeah, sustain.
He even left you a very generous amount on his original will, correct?
Yes.
So you and your daughter live on the estate and have all your needs provided for by Nano just by being his personal assistant, correct?
Yes.
And that's because you're his best friend, right?
Yes, well, I consider Nano my best friend, so I would think so.
You also claim you were his only friend in college, right?
Well, yes, he really didn't talk to anyone, and I'm the only really that approached him.
You just described him as unique. Is that correct?
Yes, he was brilliant. He was one of the smartest people I've known.
Even further, you mentioned you recognized he was a genius, but there's a fine line between genius and a weirdo. Is that correct?
Yes, but he was a genius. I wouldn't consider him a weirdo.
Okay, and you were the only one at MIT who recognized this?
Well, I feel like a lot of people recognize that he was a smart person. I'm the only one that actually approached him and became his friend.
Interesting. Not only that, Nano was the only person at MIT who behaved like a genius. Is that correct?
Yes.
You mentioned he was acting strange recently, right?
Yes, he was acting out and acting weird. Like, I didn't know it was wrong.
But wasn't he always like this?
No, he rarely ever acted out or being in this situation. It was just weird that like the last couple of days before he said he was acting out like this.
But you mentioned in college he had a freak out because he couldn't find a napkin, right?
Yes, but that was years before.
And you didn't think it was weird at the time?
No, because everyone has a freak out.
Over a napkin?
I wouldn't know. he did have mental problems at the end of the day. There's certain situation that he could have provoked him to be in that situation, and I wouldn't know because I'm not a therapist. I just knew that it was something wrong with him.
So you're claiming that you knew there was something wrong with him at the time?
No, I knew there was something wrong with him a couple of days before his death. He was acting out and acting strange. I didn't know what to do.
Okay, so you were recently worried that because he took some time alone on his 30th floor for 2 weeks.
Yes, he didn't come out of his room, and when he did come out,
Okay.
acting like nothing happened.
So you'd say some time alone is cause for concern, but having a full-on panic about a napkin isn't a concern.
I'm talking about the recent. I'm talking about recently how he's been acting.
Objection on non-responsive.
Sustained. Please answer the direct question.
Can you repeat the question?
So you'd say some alone time is cause for concern, but having a full-on panic about a napkin isn't a concern?
I would say yes. If you're alone for 2 weeks, you would be concerned about it.
And despite these issues, you claim Nano was able to make and maintain a billionaire status?
Yes, because at the end of the day, he was still a genius. I was only his personal assistant. I wasn't a person.
Do you realize that if the jury finds that Nano was not competent enough to make a will, you'd be coming into a very generous inheritance from the previous will? Is that true?
Yes, but I really did not care about the money. I cared about my best friend dying.
Is it in your economic best interest for the jury to decide that Nano was not competent enough to make a will? True?
I would say yes, but he already left me money in his original will.
Objection non-responsive after yes.
Sustained.
And if he wasn't competent to make a will, if he had these problems that you claim he had, then he wasn't competent enough to do a lot of things, right?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that question?
So if he wasn't competent to make a will, if he had these problems that you claim, then he wasn't competent enough to do a lot of things, correct?
Well, I never said he wasn't competent to his will.
So you think he's competent to make the will that he made in the submersible?
No, I'm saying in the beginning where he was still mentally stable and not in that situation that he was about to die.
So if you're saying that if he wasn't competent to make a will, if he had these problems that you claim, then he wasn't competent enough to do a lot of things.
I wouldn't know. I just knew that he had problems that I couldn't fix, and I was just trying to help him as his personal assistant.
So you're not trying to tell the jury the only thing he was incompetent to do was make a will, right?
He wasn't competent to do anything. I wouldn't say that he wasn't competent.
So he wasn't competent enough to do anything.
The certain situation that he was a submersible trying to do as well. His
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Let's don't talk over each other. Non-responsive is sustained.
So
focus on the question and answer the question. If you go ahead.
Sorry. Okay, so if he couldn't make decisions about his will, then he probably couldn't do a lot of things, correct?
I would say no. He's able to do a lot of things.
But so you're saying that the only thing he's incompetent to do was make a will, then? Is that correct?
He was probably to do a will in that certain situation where he was in the submersible.
So hang on. Okay. So if what you're saying is true, then you took advantage of him because he wasn't competent enough to decide to pay your expenses, to keep you as a personal assistant, to give you a salary, and to let you live in his tower, right?
I didn't ask him for any of those things. He gave them to me. He offered them to me.
But you're claiming that he's incompetent, and
I never claimed that.
So you think he was competent to make the will in the submersible?
No, he was not. I'm saying about that certain situation, he was incompetent because it was a life or death situation, and his whole
Okay,
life
so it's not because of his mental state then?
and his mental state in the situation, as well as days beforehand, yes, he was incompetent. But for now, and all these years I've known him, he's the one that offered me things. I did not take advantage of him.
But you said recently he wasn't competent. So recently you did take advantage of him because he wasn't competent enough to decide to pay your expenses and everything else, right?
No, because recently I'm still his personal assistant and working at his firm. I truly do not know how you're saying I was the one taking advantage of him.
You're saying it was okay that he gave you all this stuff even though he was incompetent?
I never took advantage of him. He offered these things. The job.
Objection, Your Honor, non-responsive.
Okay.
So
Response, Your Honor.
No.
My client cannot answer that question with a yes or no.
Well, it's an either or question. All right, I tell you what, ask the question again.
So it was okay that he gave you this stuff even though he was incompetent, right?
And what's your answer?
I said it was okay, but he was not incompetent. He was competent the whole time he's been my friend and asked me to give me these things and offered me a job and live in his apartment.
All right. That's a fair answer. Continue.
So you claim he is competent then?
In the certain situations where he wasn't in a submersible and it was a live dead situation, I say yes. And when he wasn't having.
So you're saying the only time his mental state wasn't okay, despite everything you just said earlier, that the only time his mental state wasn't okay was in the submersible?
No,
even though you claim. Sorry?
His mental state hasn't been okay, but because of his mental state not being okay, I wouldn't be a blame of taking advantage of him because I've known him for all these years that I've tried to help him. And it's only certain situations how he's been like this.
The witness is instructed not to launch into a narrative. Just answer the question, please.
Can you read the question?
So, so the only time he wasn't competent was in the submersible, despite everything you've claimed previously that his mental state wasn't impaired before the submersible.
No, his mental state has been a problem.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Asked and answered. When the witness has already answered this question various times.
Response, Your Honor?
Go ahead with your response. Yes.
The witness is continuously contradicting herself, and so I'm trying to clarify what she is saying.
I'm going to sustain the asked and answered. I think your point is
Okay.
very, very much before us.
Okay. So you're his personal assistant. You're the only one he thinks of as his friend. So when he was in the submersible, you decided to take a vacation, true?
Yes, well, I thought he was going to be gone for a couple of days, and I went to Florida.
And you remained there even after you found out about the death.
Well, I couldn't leave. There was a plane overtaken. There was no plane rides I could take.
So you're telling me that when things go wrong, your vacation was more important?
I'm sorry, I can't hear you.
So when things go wrong, your vacation was more important.
No, it just I wasn't able to go back home because there was no plane.
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
The question sorry, asked and answered. The witness has already answered this question.
Sustained.
So your time away from work and enjoying yourself was more important than coming back when Nano was lost, right?
No, because when I found out that he died and he was in this reversal, I knew it was him. I was devastated that I found out that my best friend died. I yeah, I tried to go back home, but there was no plane rides, as I said before.
That's interesting that, and with all the wealth, you couldn't afford some sort of private jet? Question mark? Sorry. Right? Sorry.
All the contacts that have private jet, it's from Nano. I'd be using
Objection, Your Honor.
What's the objection?
Relevance?
No, I'm going to overrule the objection. She said there's a pilot strike, and she's a pilot. I think it's a fair question.
So there was no way with all the money that you couldn't get a pilot?
I was already in a mental space that I couldn't think. The only thing I was thinking about was that my best friend died. Did you want me to be in a car and drive there knowing that my mental state wasn't in the right place?
So you're saying your mental state wasn't in the right place?
My best friend died. I knew my mental state was in the right place.
Interesting. Did I pass the witness?
All right.
Your Honor, we would like to do a redirect.
I don't know if the rules permit that. That's a good question.
Justin? Is Justin there?
Yes,
Can we do redirect?
yes, we can. It
Okay.
still counts towards their time limit of, I guess this is direct, so 25 minutes, but it is allowed redirect and recross if there is a redirect.
Okay, and what are you showing us the time right now? Are you keeping time?
I have someone keeping time, but we weren't doing it cumulatively like we probably should have.
That's
So
all right.
I can check. Give me a sec.
Okay, I mean, I just want to make sure we're on the same page.
All right. Let me remind y'all, I'm going to have to leave. I mean, this is,
We're close to having.
and you still got closing. So what I'm going to do, don't worry about the rule. I'm going to give you 2 minutes on redirect. I'm going to give you a minute and a half on recross if you want it. Be efficient, please. Okay, redirect.
Sounds good, Your Honor. Thank you. Miss Eubanks, when was the handkerchief incident?
It was during MIT in 2010 when we first met, me and Nano.
Miss Eubanks, were you ever taking advantage of Nano?
No, Nano has been one of my closest friends and one of my companions in my life.
From your perspective, were Mr. Design's mood swings consistent after the handkerchief incident?
No, not really. It was unusual when it actually did happen.
Just to be clear, you and Nano were best friends before becoming his assistant, right?
Yes, we've known each other for years in MIT.
You would have been there for Nano for his funeral if you would have found a flight. Is that correct?
Yes, I would never miss my best friend's funeral.
Thank you, Your Honor. We pass the witness.
Right. Recross.
Briefly. So you stated that you thought it was unusual that he had this incident with the handkerchief earlier. Correct? Just now, sorry.
I'm sorry. Can you like rephrase that? I don't understand.
Yes, sorry. You just stated that you thought this incident with the handkerchief was weird that he had in college.
No, what I just said was that it was unusual of him actually mental breakdowns when it did happen.
So he has been having unusual incidents throughout his life, then, if what you're saying is true.
I've only seen it a couple of times, and that was an MIT, and then a couple of times before the actual accident that happened.
Objection, non-responsive.
Overruled.
Okay. So you stated that you were not able to fly home and you couldn't drive because you were mentally unstable, but you didn't know about the death yet, did you? You just knew something went wrong, right?
I knew for a fact it was Nano. The second I figured out it was the submersible, I knew it was him.
But you didn't know if he was dead or alive, correct?
In a situation like that, the only answer would be death. And I was already, I couldn't fly back. If I couldn't fly back from my best friend's funeral, it's because I was still in Florida. Yes, I knew about his death during Florida.
So
You've run out of time.
okay.
That concludes the witness examination. Closing statements, or do you need a minute? Yeah, if the plaintiff's ready, if y'all are ready, then we'll begin with the plaintiff's closing. Who is closing for the plaintiffs?
I am, Your Honor.
Are you reserving any time?
Yes, we'd like to reserve time at the end for a rebuttal.
Right. You can reserve up to 1 minute for rebuttal.
Thank you.
When you're ready.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, Your Honor, this is a case of a man who wanted to leave his wealth to something he truly cared about. Nano Design was a billionaire and local celebrity. The submersible was not in its beginning stages, and it had been tested 4 times prior to this tragedy, completely unexpected. So when he met this tragic fate in this submersible, the community was shocked. Nano was a guy who loved the tutu, and when he was determined to do something, he would do it no matter the cost. But when he was in the submersible, he understood he was dying and decided he would make his last wishes through a quickly written will. This was his last chance to change his will that he so often changed. However, he made a small mistake. He quickly wrote the will and referred to the Aquatic Center for Exploration as ACE. Crystal Clear confirms this is their logo and primary way of referral. If ACE referred to something else, like an inside nickname that no one else heard, how can it be tied back to the correct person if no one knew who it was? Nano was a genius and would know to use a name that others would also knew, so it would go to the right place. He would not make a will to be found where the recipient was unclear to the person reading it. The Aquatic Center for Exploration is the true and obvious ACE addressed in the will. Now you may ask, was this will valid? Yes, it undoubtedly was. We have shown through the witness Alex Chern Eubanks, Nano was always a guy who acted a little strange. So this behavior wasn't unusual for him. It was just his genius shining through. Even Dr. Terry Clock confirms that they saw nothing mentally wrong with Nano. He scored perfectly fine on the test he was administered for his mental state. Nano was a weird guy, but weird doesn't mean crazy. Alex testified that Nano has always been a little weird. Wilson states that he believes Nano was perfectly sane when he wrote the will. There was no way the defense can claim he was out of his right mind. Let's just look at the flip side for a moment. Had this been true, we would see Alex Chern Eubanks took advantage of a man she believed to be mentally incompetent to make his own decisions. She claims this man gave her a salary, an extravagant lifestyle, living in a massive tower with vacations and everything paid for her and her child, yet she never saw anything wrong. So we see Alex is willing to paint herself as a person who does horrible things for money just to receive more money, even after Nano's death. Her duplicity clearly shows us she just wants money. Dr. Cloth additionally claims that his handwriting quality remained intact. If his body was truly shutting down, his handwriting quality would have decreased. Nano had breathing issues from a mountain climb in South America, but after a couple days, they were gone with no lingering effects, which could have even made his lungs stronger from dealing with this low oxygen. Mr. Lung even further confirms this by testifying that Nano underwent low oxygen scuba dive training. Nano often spent massive amounts of money and continuously generated massive amounts of money. Jackie Lung confirms Nano himself spent $300,000 on scuba training. He often met with his lawyer to discuss his will. This not only shows you he knows the extent of his wealth. Nano wrote his will and left it to the Aquatic Center for Exploration so they could continue their deep sea exploration and allow their technology to be more distributed around the world and allow the ocean to become a less dangerous place. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, knowing all this, we are confident you will decide in favor of the prosecution. The only way justice will be served. Thank you.
Defense?
Thank you, Your Honor. May it please the court, members of the jury, opposing counsel, ladies and gentlemen, none of this adds up. I want you to remember that phrase as I continue. Plaintiff would lead you to believe that their story is airtight, that it's a dam with no holes, keeping the water from flooding it. But ladies and gentlemen, in reality, their dam has so many leaks, it wouldn't even hold a puddle. We, the defense, have shown that the plaintiff has not reached their burden in proving their claims surrounding November 1st and the dive of the Tutu submersible. Ladies and gentlemen, I know you were met with a lot of information today, but let me assure you of some things. First, I want you to think about exactly what you are having to decide today. It is your job as jurors of this court to determine if Mr. DeSign had sufficient testamentary capacity when he wrote his holographic will in the submersible. If he had testamentary capacity, it means that he, 1, understood that he was making a will, 2, understood the effect of making a will, 3, that he understood the nature and extent of his property, and that 4, he knew the persons that he meant to devise and bequeath his property to. Essentially, what this means, ladies and gentlemen, is that you are here to determine if Nano DeSign was mentally competent while he was inside the submersible. It was the plaintiff's burden to prove these 4 elements, and they have failed to do that. We, the defense, have shown various pieces of evidence to show that Nano was not mentally competent when he wrote the will in the submersible. You heard from many individuals during this trial, including Chris Leclerc, CEO of the Aquatic Center for Exploration, and the person that greenlit the dive in the first place, despite knowing that the proper tests hadn't yet been completed. We, the defense, showed how Chris Leclerc was only convinced to greenlight it after Nano DeSign deposited over $100 million into the Aquatic Center's account, and how they refused to notify the proper authorities of the said dive because they knew it was not allowed. None of this adds up. You heard from Terry Cloth, Mr. DeSign's personal physician that knew him for many years. You heard them discuss Mr. DeSign's poor lung capacity and health conditions that very likely negatively impacted his time in the submersible and his mental health. This account was backed up by Dr. Max Northshire, who gave their professional opinion that showed that Nano was not adequately equipped to sustain mental stability for the length the plaintiff claims he did. None of this adds up. You heard from Jackie Lunn, a diving instructor that worked with Mr. DeSign in preparation for what they thought was, quote, scuba diving. Now, this already is cause for scrutiny, but what's even worse is that Mr. DeSign never even finished his training. He quit after 11 days, while the whole regimen was supposed to last 21. None of this adds up. You heard from Will I Handle It, a Texoma handler and the attorney that helped Mr. DeSign craft his prior wills. She told you that Mr. DeSign never had a single beneficiary when he wrote one of his many wills. She told you that Mr. Design was a very charitable man, and he liked to divide his riches among various causes and individuals and organizations that he cared deeply about. Why then would he suddenly reverse years of precedence and give it all to one? It doesn't add up. Now, even if you should find that Nana was mentally competent at the time he wrote the will in the submersible, despite all the evidence, the defense still contends that Alex Chern Eubanks is the intended beneficiary. You heard from Miss Eubanks herself, who described the deep connection she shared with Mr. Design. The pair went back over a decade, and Miss Eubanks had cemented herself as his most trusted confidant. Now, she never wanted Mr. Design to get on the submersible. In fact, she was insistent on it. You heard how this led to disagreements that finally boiled over into an argument on the morning of the dive. I forgive you. That's what was written on the will. You, not I forgive them or I forgive the company. I forgive you, Alex Chern Eubanks. Ladies and gentlemen, the plaintiff's arguments are like a dam slowly cracking under the inaccuracies they try to lead you all to believe. Inaccuracies and half-truths that we, the defense, think are unacceptable. Instead of plugging the holes with concrete and steel, they sealed it with duct tape. If there's one thing you remember as you go to deliberate, remember, none of this adds up. And because of that, you must vote in favor of the defense. Thank you very much.
All right. Rebuttal, 1 minute.
Thank you. Your Honor, we have met our burden of proof. He understood his will. He knew the persons he was giving it to, and he knew his legal rights. We have seen that he has always acted like this. We see that he had this mental capacity to create a will. We have said many have said he wants to find a treasure, so giving it to Ace would fit in right into his behavior, that he so often changed it to give his money to things that he was so passionate about. He was also so well trained that there was no way he was unprepared. Jackie Lung proves he was extremely ahead of his course and even gave him an advanced course, which they didn't even require. So the only way you can vote the only way you can vote is in favor of the prosecution. Thank you.
Good job, both teams. Impressive.
Justin?
Yes.
Hey, since our attorney needs to leave, do you think we could talk tomorrow before we start the next one to see who he thought won that?
I think my students would be good with that.
Okay, and then we can maybe stay a little later tomorrow if you want, or decide the next day, however works for you, okay? But,
yeah, I think we're good with that.
If you want
okay?
If you want to debrief now,
yeah, if you have to go.
I'm fine to debrief right now. If you want, without our attorney, okay? Or if you just
I think a lot of mine have to go because it ran a little bit longer than I think they told their parents. So
okay, that's fine. Then we'll just stop here.
But I think we'll be happy to debrief tomorrow, and we all know expect slightly later tomorrow. So that we can debrief on
video
both.
to you tonight.
Okay.
Okay.
So all of mine know now.
Okay. Well, I'll have the video to you tonight, Justin. Okay.
Also, I just want to say good job to the other team.
Thank you, guys. That was really good. Great job.
Great.
Thank you. I'm sorry. I accidentally got my sound muted. So was anything said before that? I'm so sorry.
Justin, I was just telling you, just thanks for the great match. You've got a great team. And I will record this, make a recording, put it on YouTube and send it to you tonight.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
Okay. And we'll talk to you more tomorrow. Okay.
All right. Sounds good.
Thank you.
Bye, guys.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
need my.
Cora, can you take him into my room and have him get his stuff?